Hello, I am here today with Avi Warshavsky, the CEO of MindCET, one of the preeminent global startup accelerators for education companies. Also, one of the oldest education accelerators anywhere in the world. We'll talk a little bit about that and Avi's takes on some of the global developments in education in a second. But before we do that, Avi, I would love if you could just, in your own words, talk about your career narrative. How did you end up as CEO of MindCET? What was the sort of path you took to get there?
Thank you, Matt. I was always in between technology and pedagogy. Like my formal education is in the humanities. I learned philosophy and history and stuff like that. But my passion was always about technology, and I tried to combine those two worlds and started in startups and moved on to more established companies in Israel. And about 10 years ago, I was in the senior management team of CET, Center for Educational Technology, which is one of the most dominant, probably the most dominant player in Israel, both in educational publishing and software house for education. And we realized that we need to change our mindset in a way and try to narrow the gap between the way learning is done inside schools and universities and the way that each one of us is learning as individual in this technological age. And we established Mindset out of CT. This is why we spelled Mindset with a C, which has the privilege to think ahead a few years and suggest new solutions, basically technological solutions for the world of learning. So this is like in a nutshell my journey. In between, I was dealing a lot with the e-publishings. I really had the privilege to be one of the first actors in the world of ebooks back then, and had some other interesting initiatives. But Mindset is a whole new kind of adventure that we started about 2012.
Amazing. Yeah. And I have to imagine that humanities and philosophy background has just gotten progressively more relevant as the software industry has matured. And I feel like a lot of the decision making we make around education products today is far more philosophical and sort of neurological than it is sort of core software developments.
Absolutely. And actually, when I'm meeting young people who are hesitating what they should learn, I always encourage them to learn humanities, because I feel that this age of generative AI really is the big word machine, and you need to be very competent in understanding language and how to use it properly.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend the whole episode on that, but I think like, this shift from deterministic software development where you have to think of every possible, use case in code to probabilistic software development where you have to think of sort of declarative statements in English or in whatever language you're coding in, and being more precise with your language is a real important mindset shift that I think we're still reckoning with. I don't know that we
Yeah.
have a great sort of framework for. Anyways, I'd love to. So Mindset's been around since 2012. Can you talk about some of the startups that have gone through it and had experienced some like good success? I interviewed David from Jot. Gosh, I think back in March, and
Yeah.
loved hearing his story. He obviously came from I think I remember him coming from Nike and the corporate software world and then getting into EdTech. What are some of the other sort of big success stories out of Mindset?
Well, first of all, it's always difficult to choose, but I can say that
I know,
Mindset.
I know. All of the companies that go through are great. So
Yeah,
I'm sorry for putting you on the spot.
we're interested in everything that is connected to learning. So during the years, we had success stories both in K to 12 and in higher ed, in vocational training, etc. I think one great example is actually alumni of our second cohort, which is about 11 years ago now. Code Monkey. I don't know if you came across this company, but Code Monkey
It
is
sounds familiar, yeah, but please talk about it.
it's a great example because I think they have like a bottom line, which is dual, like both impact and business size. They are an app that teaches kids to code through gaming. I think they were one of the first ones to do that. Today we have a lot of them.
Yeah.
And what I like with their product is that both the gaming is very engaging. It's a real game. It's not an educational game. Like it's really engaging, and it's also the coding is challenging. They're really demanding pretty much from the kids who are going through all the path that is designed there. And when they were in our accelerator, there was no any mandatory coding teaching in Israel in elementary school. They are aiming like a third grade, fourth grade, etc. And they started like a B2C initiative, and we helped them through our parent organization through CT to suggest this product to schools as well. And they discovered that schools are really interested in that. And fast forward, the Ministry of Education in Israel was interested because he saw the attractions of schools there, and it became to be mandatory that there is every school in Israel learns coding, and they of course were the first one to supply it. Afterwards it became to be market, and they took the same model and implemented it in other countries, in Argentina, in India, in Japan, and they were bought in 18 by TLA Education, TAL Education, the Chinese after
Yeah, yeah.
school. So it was also a very nice story in the sense of economics, because we have some equity in each of the companies we are incubating. So we had a very nice return, but it was a great story in the sense of the impact moving from B2C to B2B. And although they were bought by Chinese company, they're still based in Israel. Like the CodeMonkey brand is operating from here, and all the R&D team is based here in Israel. So in a way, it's both growing globally, but keeps the initial DNA. So I think this is one good story. I'll give another example that is very typical for, unfortunately, for success stories in EdTech. It's a company called Connectim, and they started as an app on a mobile phone that enables schools and teachers to create very quickly online courses that will be used on the mobile phone. And very quickly they realized that schools are not really interested to use mobile phone as a learning tool. And they moved to small and medium businesses. And today they're almost a unicorn, but they're not anymore edtech or pure edtech. Like they're doing training for small and medium businesses, especially screenless businesses that are moving a lot and
With
using the
like
mobile
frontline
phone.
workers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just about learning anymore. It's just about managing small organizations. So they are a great success story that they're really growing amazingly nice, but they move slightly from education. But we really love their story. I think it's a great company. And maybe I'll give a new one that we're just lately
Sure.
invested in, just to accomplish the range. It's a company called Cody, and they are teaching coding in a similar philosophy of Duolingo, like vocational coding. The idea is that the people who are using this app are not planning to be programmers or working in a high-tech industry, that just want to be literate using code. And they give this, and they do it B2C right now, which we always afraid of B2C business model, but it's really grows amazingly. What's unique in their story, none of them is a marketing person. They're all engineers, but very accurate engineers. So they really know how to plan this and how to make it happen. And it's amazing solution from my perspective. Probably many of the people who will be interested to learn code in the future will do it in this way of trying to get the basic literacy, but not being professional in that.
Yeah, I think to our earlier point about you know, AI software development, it feels more accessible to somebody like me who's not a coder. But there's probably some tactics that I need to brush up on in order to wield those tools effectively. I really liked all of those are great examples. I think they provide highlights of like, you know, B2C ed tech can work really great. It tends to have more binary outcomes, which is trickier as an
Yeah.
investor. Like when it works, it really works and it's great. When it doesn't, there's not a lot to sell in the end, at the end of the day. Whereas B2B, I think, has a bigger middle where if something partially works, you can still get some value. So I think that highlights a really important trend that investors have to think about. And
Yeah.
then with CodeMonkey, I think I really appreciate that understanding that education, just as much as it is about marketing and sales, it's understanding policy headwinds and tailwinds and saying, look, it seems likely that 10 years from when we start this company, so 10 years from 2011 or whenever the company started, most schools are going to require some sort of computer science training. Why not get ahead of that curve? And I think that's something I wish more entrepreneurs spend
Yeah.
time thinking about. And I really appreciate when they do, because it's saying like, I'm ahead of this trend. I think in the US, we have education savings accounts. There are a few entrepreneurs that were really ahead of that trend. And they said, if this is going to be a thing, I'm going to build this and be a core infrastructure provider for this trend. So, kudos to the CodeMonkey team for seeing that, and kudos to you guys for investing in it.
Thank you.
One thing I'd love to talk through is your perspective on global EdTech. You're based in Israel, which is itself sort of an incubator of interesting technology, both EdTech and non-EdTech. And I think also it's, well connected to the US, but culturally different enough that I think it gives you some space to experiment in a way that I think sometimes US entrepreneurs and investors won't for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're scared, sometimes they have other reasons. So I'd love just to get your perspective on how global education is changing, specifically in ways that might surprise somebody in the US that they might not be thinking about or might not be aware of. So, free reign to take that wherever you will.
Gladly. Actually, maybe I'll start from my personal perspective on this. Like when we started MindCET, we knew that Israel is a tiny market and the most successful companies cannot really grow inside this market. This is the case for any vertical in Israel, not just for education. And the Israeli entrepreneurs usually are looking globally from day one, which is a big advantage I think they have. Like they always know that they have to scale somehow. And we realized that if we want to help our companies to scale, when we started the whole edtech scene, even in the US, was pretty new, we need to generate some kind of global community. And we initiated alongside with other partners the GESA Awards, the Global EdTech Startup Awards, which grew up organically. I think the good thing about it was that we had no budget for that. So all the partners really are really partnering because everyone is contribute something to this initiative. We have today about 40 partners across the globe, and in each location, the local partner is running the competition, and we are like organizing the global one. And through the GESA Awards, first of all, we learn to meet companies from all over the globe. We have data we have every year about 1,000 companies who apply to the
Whoa.
competition
Yeah.
from 135 or 34 countries. And
Holy
this,
moly.
yeah, it's amazing. And we also, so we have a lot of data that we can learn from about what's going on globally, like trends, etc. But we also have the privilege to be part of the encounter between those companies. We usually do the finals in the BET show in London every year.
Sure.
In the same week, we are hosting a boot camp of 2 days that all the finalists from all over the world are joining it. So it's about 60 companies that are, you can see a company from Brazil, from Japan, from Israel, from the US, and they are all in the same room in the same time, which is amazing to learn about. And going back to your question, I think first of all, something that I guess it's trivial, but not always we think about. Education usually was very local thing. Like it was the way to preserve your heritage and nationality. Like there's a lot of research about Cold War and the way science was learned both in the Soviet Union from the one end and in the US from the other end. And in
Yeah.
both cases, it was a very national thing. And from the other hand, I think what we are facing in the last 2 or 3 decades is that we are moving more and more to global education. First of all, thanks to the international tests. Literally, almost every kid in the world is taking more or less the same tests. And generate a very similar criteria, at least in STEM education, and makes it much more closer. And of course, there is another layer which is deeper, and this is the cultural one. Most of the kids in the world are members in the same communities, like they're all in Instagram, in TikTok.
Roblox, Minecraft.
Exactly. And this generates a lots of similarities that we didn't have in the past, and I think it's opens a sort of a gate to export education, something that we could not think about years ago. And so I think this is like the common ground to think that global education can happen. And the non-trivial piece is that most of the countries in the world, maybe beside of the US, really need to go outside the region to grow. Even if you let's say you are a company from France or from Germany, the market practically is not big enough for a startup
We're a
to
venture-backed
grow.
exit. Yeah.
So they all need to look outside the region, and the big question is always understanding the differences and the different value chain in each place and the way of decision making. And always education has some kind of political aspects as well. And so the communication between different entrepreneurs across the ocean, for instance, is extremely important. And the learning there is really necessary. And I can add one more piece again that I think it's not trivial from companies outside the US. Most of the countries across the globe don't have a real edtech investment ecosystem. Like a startup in Latin America, for instance, even if it grows very nicely, usually it's bootstraps.
Yeah.
You don't have many investors that will invest in edtech. And the same goes to many other regions. Like there are a few venture funds in Europe. I can count them, I think, on one hand, probably.
It's like 5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, much less than you would imagine that are needed to support this kind of ecosystem. And again, comparing to the US, and this generates both challenges and opportunities. Like the opportunities are that company who grew up in let's say Mexico or Argentina and became to revenue probably is a real company. Like they
Yeah.
started from a very basic spreadsheet and find their way up. From the other hand, sometimes without having access to investment, you cannot really do the thing that we expect from startup to do, like the growth that we
Right.
would imagine that would happen. So it's sort of a trade-off.
Yeah, I think that's a really compelling insight of one, there is a certain utility to having to grow beyond your home market early in your progress path and making your tool sufficiently uh, let's call it multifaceted to be able to serve, students in Israel just as well as they serve students in Europe, as well as students in the US. And from a product development standpoint and a product evolution standpoint, that makes a ton of sense. And then further, I love this sort of, I feel like politically there's so much sort of nationalist sentiment around the world, right? That's
Yeah,
not directed at any one country, but the sense that our young people are actually maybe more global than ever and are participating in these communities that are super global. And I don't know that we've felt the full effect of that yet because those, preteens and teens are still growing up. But I wonder the impact that that'll make as they come into their own in their jobs and in politics and in business. As somebody who really appreciates being able to travel and see the world, that does provide me with some hope and some intrigue for the future of EdTech. So thank you, Avi, for sharing that and for putting in all the blood, sweat, and tears to build truly one of the best and longest lasting accelerators in EdTech. You're doing really important work, and I'm grateful that you were willing to come on and chat with me today.
thank you, Matt, and it's really an honor. And as I told you, I'm a very loyal reader of your newsletter for many years, from its start, I guess.
You're very kind. Thank you.